The media has spent years, decades, lying about the Middle East, about Israel, lying about the term occupation. I corrected the media about that in episode 1, and more than a year later, no news agency has refuted anything I said in there because they know it's true. They've lied about international law, too. I did an episode about that. They have treated terrorists' false messages as fact and portrayed a tiny dot of a state as the opposite of what it is. As the media has done that, terrorism has grown, like the kind that led to the October 7th, 2023 massacres by Palestinian terrorists against people in Israel. Throughout this war, the media has been lying, taking Hamas claims as fact while ignoring everything that Israel, a democracy, presents as hard, concrete, factual information. Students at elite universities and their professors, many of them sponsored by Qatar, go crazy, break laws, threaten and intimidate people, and insist that they are oh so righteous. Someone firebombs the house of Pennsylvania's governor on Passover. The other day, the UN lied with a claim that didn't even make sense. If the media had just stopped to look at what this UN official said, they would have seen that it was false. Instead, the media repeated it to the world, and an attacker killed a couple of young people at a Jewish event in Washington, D.C. Days later, the media lied about Israel allegedly shooting at people while they were collecting aid in Gaza, which obviously didn't make sense. And there's video to prove the claims are false. Hamas wants people in Gaza to believe this is happening because Hamas wants to control their access to food. So Hamas is trying to scare people away from where the aid is being provided. And the easiest tool is to get the media to spread those lies. And a man firebombed a group of people at a demonstration for the Israeli hostages. This was a peaceful demonstration in Colorado. As I record this, the numbers are still coming in, but a bunch of people were wounded, at least one of them critically. Among the people taken to hospitals is an 88-year-old. You could try to say that all this is correlation, not causation, that somehow the media is not responsible. But here's the deal. The media has a responsibility to tell the truth, always. The media has become the biggest tool in terrorists' arsenal. So we end up in this backward reality in which government officials are having to do the work that the media is supposed to do. Coming up, my conversation with someone who is in that position.
First, we are blamed for something that we never did. Then we are blamed for not responding quickly enough to what we were accused of, because we actually investigate and we actually look into the allegations. And then when a few hours later we come back with the facts, and in this case with video footage, well, the international community has moved on.
Now, because that story is still moving right now, and I want to keep it as up-to-date for you as possible, that will be coming up later in the show. I have something else for you first. This is a story that we really need to stop and examine in order to see who is responsible for constant media disasters. The executives who guide news agencies. This is a story about what's going on in America, the mess we're in, especially politically, the media's role in it, and how efforts by big media to get more of your hard-earned money are driving this problem. That is coming up, plus a big trip I'm about to take, which provides an opportunity for you. Something I'm incentivizing because on this, I need your support. You'll hear why. It's coming up today on They Stand Corrected. Hello and welcome. So awesome to have you here. My name is Josh Levs, and this is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact-checks the news. I spent 20 years in mainstream media, 10 on NPR and 10 on CNN, where I became lead on-air fact-checker. I saw throughout all that time how incredibly many reports would not pass basic fact-checking. With each episode, I send out a newsletter. It's packed with links and more information. I encourage you to get it. It is free, but in order to support this show, I encourage you to become a paid subscriber, and you get more information that way. You also make this show possible. It means so much. I see the name of every person who decides to become a supporter that way. And supporters have the chance to send in messages. Here's the latest. Let's see. This one comes from Cecilia Schmieder. She writes, I appreciate your factual correction of the common sloppy and deliberately misleading coverage on every subject, complete with links. Most of all, I am thankful for the way you pick apart the consistently bonkers coverage of anything Israel related. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Cecilia. I've been hearing from more and more people saying, why is it that one side of the media ignores the lies coming from the right wing and mainstream media ignores the lies coming from the left wing? Well, if you're new to this show, that is a big topic I cover here, and I'm going to be talking about that today as well. Speaking of what Cecilia just said, actually, I have an announcement for you. This is happening really fast. I have been asked to be part of a delegation to visit Israel. I will be meeting with people, of course, of different backgrounds, religions, perspectives. On this delegation, there's especially going to be a focus on the potential healing power of the arts, international cooperation in the arts, and this quick trip will include visits to areas that were attacked in the unimaginably evil October 7th, 2023 massacres. We'll be meeting with survivors at the kibbutzes, and at the Nova Music Festival. That was a peace festival in which mostly young people of all backgrounds, religions, etc., were dancing together and enjoying music when the massacres and mass rapes by Palestinian Islamist terrorists took place. Anyway, putting together this episode will take extra work and extra expense. So I am right now incentivizing people to become founding members of this show at the newsletter. There is a special tier called founding members, and I've been thinking, what can I do for people who choose to become founding members? Here's one idea. People of all backgrounds and religions take part in this tradition of putting a note in the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall. If you choose to become a founding member of this show, you'll be helping support this upcoming episode. You will be heroic to me in that way. And I will happily put a note for you into the wall if that's something you want. Or maybe you want a special photo or video while I'm there, or there's a question you want me to ask someone. I'm listing some possibilities in the newsletter, and you can come to me with creative things. It is a ground zero in the fight for democracy. So is the United States. So is Ukraine. And keep in mind, just as Iranian proxies, Hamas, attacked people in Israel, Iranian proxies, the Houthis, killed U.S. soldiers last year and have continued to make threats against the United States. So being in the region, seeing things on the ground, talking to people, it will be an opportunity for me to tell you new things that the media has been getting wrong. So check out the newsletter for that. Okay, now let's get into your money. Here's the deal. There is a new book called Original Sin about President Biden's decline and its cover-up. It's by Jake Tapper of CNN and Alex Thompson of Axios. These are two people whom you've heard on this show before. I have played Jake Tapper asking questions and then sitting there while the politician answering lies. And Tapper, of course, does nothing about it. No fact-checking. And I played you Alex Thompson at the White House Correspondents Association dinner because he was the only person I saw who admitted anything wrong with today's media when he at least said this.
We, myself included, missed a lot of this story, and some people trust us less because of it. We bear some responsibility for faith in the media being at such lows.
But that quote was also part of a setup for selling this book. He and Jake Tapper are out selling what they found from interviewing a lot of people from Biden's world about the cover-up of his decline. There is so much wrong with this. I touched on it in a piece for The Contrarian, which was cross-posted to my newsletter, which basically just means you can find it in my newsletter. But there is a lot more to say here. First, let's tackle something that Jon Stewart said on The Daily Show. He played clips of Jake Tapper day after day trying to get you to pre-order the book. And The Daily Show pointed out that this was a network-wide effort, even after Biden's cancer diagnosis was announced. Here's a shortened version of some of what The Daily Show put together.
Biden's health was very much in the news even before the cancer diagnosis was announced on Sunday. That's because of a new book by CNN's Jake Tapper.
This was already going to be a tough week, and this makes it much harder. Our colleague, Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, have a book that's set to publish.
It's very challenging news. And at the same time, the backdrop of our colleague Jake Tapper's book with Alex Thompson.
I'm sure some observers will say that the reporting in the book is even more important now.
Yet nobody's saying that. Some observers might think, do these CNN people work on commission? Like, why are they hawking this fucking thing?
I might be able to answer that question based on things that happened when I was inside CNN. First, this book was published by Penguin Random House, which is part of Bertelsmann. I don't see a current direct business link between Bertelsmann and Warner Brothers Discovery, which owns CNN. But there doesn't have to be one because networks do this anyway. When I was inside CNN, at one point, we got a network-wide email from a top executive saying that our two priorities were breaking news and selling the book of one of the CNN personalities. You should know this is obviously unethical. This goes directly against the compact that journalists make with you, the audience. The idea is we want you to buy the newspaper or sign up for the website or contribute or something like that. And in exchange, we provide you the news there. We are not supposed to use news platforms to push products to enrich one of us. So any outlet should have other people decide whether the book is worth doing a story about. And if so, they do a story about it and they follow certain rules. This is obviously not what's happening here. So why do networks do this anyway? Because of something I've mentioned here before. News agencies are obsessed trying to create quote unquote stars. The whole idea of stardom is so poisonous to journalism. It leads to news agencies doing all kinds of things, like they book guests who really shouldn't be interviewed for any editorial reason, but they think the quote unquote star anchor will look good doing the interview. So then they're platforming people who you don't even need to hear from. They refuse to fact check guests because they think it will make anchors look bad for not having fact checked them in the first place. There's so much that they do. This obsession with creating stars leads networks to push books like this, even though in general, it makes no difference in the ratings. Anyway, here are two more quick clips from Jon Stewart.
Don't news people have to tell you what they know when they find it out? Isn't that the difference between news and a secret? The news is selling you a book about news they should have told you was news a year ago for free.
Yup. This is big media profiting off of its own failure. We didn't tell you this at the time when we should have, but now you can pay to find out what we know. What? Not only that, but mainstream news agencies downplayed the reporting that did exist. The Wall Street Journal recently did an editorial arguing that Jake Tapper himself downplayed reporting in the Journal about Biden's health during his presidency. There's also now an infamous clip of Tapper speaking with Laura Trump. At one point, he was insisting that she had insulted Biden's stutter.
I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable
You are
to
no
watch somebody on stage
that's so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
Well, when you're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you were
stuttering,
mocking his stutter.
Yeah,
I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline.
He is now saying that she was right and that he has apologized to her. In interviews, he has said that he should have done better, like what Alex Thompson said. In an interview with Piers Morgan, Jake Tapper was asked whether he owes America an apology for failing to cover this adequately at the time.
I feel like I owe the American people an acknowledgement that I wish I had covered the story better. That knowing what we know now and looking back on that interview, which I feel tremendous humility about.
He's used that word a bunch, humility. Time for a reality check on this. When you are making millions of dollars from a giant corporation, Warner Media, which he does, is a very highly paid anchor, and you are asking people to pay for information that you should have reported previously and should be reporting right now on the platforms they already have, like the one you're talking to them on, CNN or on CNN.com. When you are instead asking people to pay for something that enriches you, that is not what humility is. And look, it is possible to humbly try to sell something. I sometimes feel that way when I encourage people to become paid subscribers to my newsletter or make a tip to this show. But that's literally the only way I can do this. And I'm not receiving a multi-million-dollar paycheck from a large corporation. And I'm putting this information in this podcast out there for free. This formula behind pushing this book manipulates you. The media can ignore an important story until it's too late, then cash in on that failure by telling you that if you want to know what happened, you can pony up and pay for it. There is so much more to say about this coming up.
Now I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today, Josh Levs.
We are blessed to be able to have a speaker this evening who speaks with a lot of heart.
An outstanding author, a principled and groundbreaking journalist, a really engaging speaker and thinker.
Broadcaster, journalist, and host of They Stand Corrected, the podcast fact-checking the news. Thank goodness.
Josh spent 20 years reporting for NPR and CNN, where he developed unique expertise on nonpartisan fact-checking. He has been called Truth Seeker in Chief.
Josh has won multiple Peabody Awards, Murrow Awards,
and awards from the AP, from the Society of Professional Journalists, the National Association of Black Journalists, and more.
His book, All In, was published by HarperCollins and won the Nautilus Gold Award for promoting positive social change. He has spoken to the United Nations, Congress, Google.
And of course, I think is very cool, won a debate at Oxford.
He launched his podcast and newsletter called They Stand Corrected to provide listeners with the truth in a world of disinformation.
Clearly, he is a much-needed voice during these crazy times.
It's my pleasure to introduce Josh Levs to you today.
Please welcome.
Please join me in welcoming Josh Levs.
I love getting out there and meeting people like you. It's such a great opportunity to answer your questions and discover more about listeners to this show and potential listeners too. If you're interested in working out something in person or online, there's a form at my website, joshlevs.com. That's JOSHLEVS.com. You'll find a link in the show notes. Just click bookings. If the mainstream media had exposed the real extent of Biden's decline, maybe he would have dropped out sooner and the Democrats could have had an open primary. And maybe enough people would have been excited by a different candidate. We can't know. There's no doubt that it was a historical blunder all around. But is a book really necessary to tell us any of this? One more line from Jon Stewart.
It was a terrible cover-up because we all f***ing knew. All of us knew.
Even before the disastrous debate last June, huge numbers of Americans were saying that Biden was too old. I pulled up some stats here. In 2022, a poll found 61% of Democratic voters wanted someone other than Biden to be the nominee, with age being the primary concern. In 2023, more than half of Democrats and 73% of Americans were seriously concerned about his physical and mental competence. In 2024, before that debate, 2/3 of Americans said Biden was too old to be president. Don't worry about all those numbers, by the way. I make numbers available in the newsletter for anyone who wants them. The idea is it was a lot of people who already saw that this was a problem. Now, I'll tell you, part of what threw this off was Biden's fiery performance at the State of the Union in 2024. I watched him that night and was like, that's a guy who does have his mental faculties. Lots of people were. There were people on Fox theorizing / maybe joking, but probably not, that he was on some kind of magic drug that gives you your faculties, which, for the record, doesn't exist because people would be using it all the time. I'm into facts. I didn't have access to Biden, so I couldn't know. The Washington press corps should have gotten the truth, obviously. But there's also a case of crying wolf here. Yes, right-wing media were onto the truth about this. Tapper himself says so. But right-wing media have also peddled so many lies and distortions and conspiracy theories, like the lie that the 2020 election was stolen, like immigrants eating pets, like Trump being a great successful business leader. That's not his track record. These are facts. Meanwhile, there is another complaint being lodged against this book from some people on the left who say that's old news now. What about the president in office who is clearly out of touch with reality, whether or not it has anything to do with cognitive decline? I'm just listening to any of the dozens and dozens of things I've fact-checked Trump on here. There's a comedian, Andy Borowitz. He had this funny headline. It had a picture of Tapper, and it said, "Man feared to be cognitively slipping after writing a book about wrong presidents." No one comes out great here. And by the way, you may have noted, I've been talking about Jake Tapper here, not really Alex Thompson. Well, that's because in the interviews that I've seen, Tapper has either been alone or speaking way more. And that also speaks to the stardom problem I mentioned earlier. One more note about the book. There is nothing impressive about getting people from a failed campaign to talk to you. After election losses, people are happy to come forward and point fingers and blame each other, especially anonymously, which is what this book is largely built around. It's very heavily anonymous. And that's for an election loss. Multiply that exponentially for what happened here, a collapse. Of course, people are happy to talk and blame each other. Here is how I ended my piece about this for The Contrarian. This new book accuses Biden of being narcissistic, self-delusional, and reckless. Legacy media, it's time to look in a mirror. Coming up, a modern blood libel from one man's lips to the ears of, quite possibly, more than 1 billion people. It is as predictable as clockwork. Terrorists and their sympathizers make up literally anything, and the media rushes to report it as fact. That has happened throughout the war as Israel has worked to destroy the Islamist Nazi death cult Hamas. Yes, it is all those things by definition. Listen to my episode about the importance of dictionaries. Hamas is an Islamist Nazi death cult. And the media acts like it is the most trustworthy source on earth, which is why you hear alleged death tolls from Gaza, all of which come from Hamas. And you hear no mentions of Israeli reports on how many people killed were terrorists. Also, no mentions of far huger death tolls with far huger civilian ratios, including wars raging right now. In the latest examples, there's this from the BBC.
The UN's humanitarian chief has told the BBC that 14,000 babies in Gaza could die within the next 2 days unless aid can reach them.
And ABC.
The UN now warning 14,000 babies could die within 48 hours.
That was reported by basically all the big news agencies, the big papers, the Washington Post, of course, everyone. No one stopped to think, wait, what? Where is that UN guy even getting that alleged figure from? Well, turned out that was not only wrong, but wildly wrong. There was some analysis in April that guessed that if people in Gaza don't get enough food over the next year, through March of 2026, then there could be 14,000 children who might suffer from effects of malnutrition. Well, by the way, if anyone doesn't get enough food over the next year, that will happen. That's also true for you and me and everyone. The idea of 14,000 babies in 48 hours made no sense. Anyone who stopped to think could know this. But I can tell you from 20 years on the inside, the media doesn't stop to think. Someone says something, let's rush and tell the world about it. And then an evil terrorist killed a young couple who worked for the Israeli embassy, a Jewish woman and a Christian man in Washington, D.C. No one in the U.S. mainstream media seemed to realize that the media is part of the problem. Meanwhile, here is an anchor who pointed out something important.
This is not the first assassination on American soil by pro-Palestine extremists.
Sky News Australia host Andrew Bolt.
In 1968, this Palestinian, Sirhan, was so angry with presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy, his support for Israel in the Six-Day War, that Sirhan shot him too, murdered Kennedy at a hotel in Los Angeles.
He said this UN claim was clearly preposterous from the beginning, but repeated unquestioningly by media around the world, including in Australia.
I guess you, like me, now await the grovelling corrections from the ABC, from SBS, and from The Guardian, if only to cool Jew haters here. Haven't seen those corrections yet, but you know how it is with the left, don't you? A lie isn't a lie if it's in the right cause. Their cause. Hating Israel.
Yup. But because mainstream news organizations are largely controlled by people trained in those ideologies, they did the exact same thing again, just days later. This story is still moving as I record this episode. First, there was this crazy lie that Israel fired on Palestinians while they were getting aid. Then the American group providing this aid released hours of video proving that didn't happen. And these news organizations did what they always do. They buried the clarifications and corrections and threw water on them also, just in case you happen to see them. The new reports said, well, there are different claims about what happened, but the people saying this didn't happen don't trust them. Here's just one example. NBC's initial headline said that Israel had killed 21 people, witnesses say. Later, the new headline said that there were different claims, but that the group claiming this didn't happen is a controversial group. So notice this. NBC does not share that Hamas is controversial when it shares Hamas information. It did not say that the alleged witnesses were doing Hamas's bidding for them. Nothing controversial there. But this group providing the aid that also provides video proof, well, that one is controversial. And you have to read through the story to see that video even exists. And then a guy in Colorado, the suspect is currently being named as Mohammed Soleiman, firebombed peaceful marchers who were calling for the release of the hostages. As I mentioned earlier, people were wounded, some in critical condition. I spoke with Anat Sultan Dadon, the Israeli consul general to the Southeast.
We find ourselves, honestly, in an absurd reality. First, we are blamed for something that we never did. Then we are blamed for not responding quickly enough to what we were accused of, because we actually investigate and we actually look into the allegations. And then when a few hours later we come back with the facts, and in this case with video footage, well, the international community has moved on. You will still find, if you Google, you will still find the allegations presented as fact. I mean, really, it's a no-win situation, because we will have to continue to be grounded in reality. We will have to continue to be grounded in fact. And the world around us, the international media, the terrorists, the terror supporters, continue every day to come up with new allegations based against Israel. And the sad reality is this not only bashes Israel. At the other end of this, there is a civilian population, in this case, a civilian population in Gaza, who actually deserve to have a mechanism that ensures that they are the ones that are receiving the humanitarian aid going into Gaza. This is what we are working to make happen. We would think that all of those who supposedly care for the Palestinian people, we would think that they would get behind this. Not get behind the terror organization that is trying to prevent the humanitarian aid from reaching its people.
Yeah, we need the media to stand for truth, justice, to fight for democracy. And instead, it's literally doing the exact opposite. And it's become like clockwork. Every day we can expect that kind of failure. So here's what we've got. On a big story about Biden, members of the mainstream media are now acknowledging, or tacitly acknowledging in some cases, that the right-wing media got something right and they were wrong. And yet, mainstream media is pushing all these lies about Israel. Right-wing media are correcting them on that right now, and they're not acknowledging it. That's where all this comes full circle. Earlier, I played you Jon Stewart. He's right on the stuff about the book, but he is also part of the problem on the left. Jon Stewart himself has repeatedly pushed lies from pro-terrorist groups, and he platforms anti-Israel liars because if it's on the left, well, then it's somehow okay. These are the two worlds that control the media, and they're more connected than a lot of people realize. There is reporting that I can't yet fact check. I don't have access to these documents, but the reporting says the murderer in Washington, Elias Rodriguez, had posted about being a huge fan of Russia and Iran and Syria. There would be nothing surprising about that. Even though Russia is associated with the right and Iran with the left, they are fighting against democracy. Israel's fight for its existence is a crucial fight for democracy in the world, just like Ukraine's fight for its existence, just like the fight for democracy here in the United States. Israel happens to be the front line of the fight against Islamist terrorism. If Hamas gets concessions, then Islamist terrorist groups all over the world see that this works. This isn't a guess. This is literally what's happening right now. Anti-democratic forces are gaining power on the far right and the far left. If the mainstream media is willing to acknowledge how it blew it on Biden, maybe it can finally start to at least consider how badly it has blown it on coverage of the only democracy in MENA, the Middle East and North Africa. You and I are in a fight for democracy and truth. And as I mentioned earlier, I can use your support. Visit the newsletter, or there's a PayPal link if you want to make a contribution that way without getting the newsletter. Then I have ways to thank you. As always, I appreciate all of you for listening. It means so much. I will see you next week.